There are shifts that are going on now that we have never seen before. You don't know what you know and what you don't know until you try and talk about it. If you've ever been in the position where you start talking about something thinking, yes, I know about this, and as you get further into it, you think, actually, do you know what? No, I don't. You don't want to be in that position when you're in an interview or an important client meeting. So you really need to talk about this with other people. Understand yourself. If you don't do that, you are setting yourself up to fail. If you don't understand yourself and your motivations, you are not going to be able to convince anyone else.
On today's Legally Speaking podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Peter Watson. Peter is the CEO of Watson's Daily, one of the UK's leading commercial awareness and business news platforms. After building a successful career spanning stockbroking, financial markets and recruitment, Peter launched Watson's Daily in 2014. He had a simple mission: helping people understand what is happening in the world of business and why it matters. Today, Watson's Daily is supporting thousands of students, professionals, lawyers and business leaders by making complex economic developments accessible, practical and easy to understand. Peter's financial markets expertise, recruitment experience and passion for education has made him a trusted voice on commercial awareness, career development and the future of business. Today, we're exploring why commercial awareness has become one of the most valuable professional skills in an increasingly complex world. We'll discuss how business news shapes decision-making, what employers are looking for when they assess commercial awareness, and how lawyers can stand out in a competitive market, and why understanding business has never been more important. So, finally, a very big warm welcome to the show, Peter.
Hello there. I'm very excited by this. Very excited.
I'm equally excited. We've known each other for years and years, and the last sort of few episodes, it's been really a nice full circle moment for me as a host, getting to see people that we've collaborated with over the years and all the great stuff that you're doing. But before I spoil too much, we have a couple of icebreaker questions before we get into you, your journey and all the good stuff you're doing. So first one, what's your favorite beverage and what's your preferred choice of footwear on a typical work day?
So favorite beverage is Brewdog Elvis juice, because I justify that by saying that it's sort of grapefruit flavor, so it kind of counts as one of your 5 a day. So that's my favorite beverage. The in terms of footwear, I've got these Birkenstocks, which I do like a Birken. Well, I do two Birkenstocks to be precise. But yeah, there we go.
And a piece of tech that you use every day that you now rely on that would have seemed unthinkable when you first started out your career?
Well, if technically that would be the mobile phone, because I'm quite old. So I think so that's quite a good one. So yeah, probably the mobile phone.
Good stuff. All right. Well, let's talk a bit about you, Peter. Would you mind telling our listeners a bit about your background and career journey?
Let's start with university. I went to Cardiff University, best university in the whole world. So I hear. So yeah, I went there. I did law and Japanese for my degree. So I did 2 years in Cardiff. I went off to Tokyo to university over there for 2 years, which was amazing. And then I came back, did the final year in Cardiff, and then was released into the world. My first job out of uni was I was an interpreter to for a £1 billion Japanese project. So basically, it was a big Japanese company who were building a European headquarters, and I was the interpreter for the head architect of the project, which was quite scary. So did that for a bit. Then I got I got a phone call from someone I knew at university, and basically, to cut a long story short, they actually recommended me to become a stockbroker in London. So long story short, got the job, had an amazing time. And, so I was a stockbroker, 13 years, 4 different investment banks, London and Tokyo. And I advised clients. So all big, they're all big institutions, banks, insurance companies. on what stocks to buy and sell in the UK, European, and Japanese stock markets. And I either did it in English or Japanese, depending on what they wanted and how much they're going to pay me. It was really good. After that, I've also been obviously a stockbroker, but a headhunter for about 5 years, a few different institutions, all finance, mainly investment banking. I've recruited people from juniors right through to heads of M&A, CEOs, and all sorts of things. So there was that. So there's that part of my career as well. And in terms of what's what's leading to now, is that I now write a newsletter, which the sole purpose of this newsletter is to try to help people to understand, remember, and use business and financial markets news, because I think it's kind of the scary news. I often say that people see it as the boring news, but it's the boring news that can earn you a lot of money. So that's why I'm trying to help people to understand it, make it less scary, and to be honest, have a bit of fun, because I think a lot of people take themselves far too seriously in this kind of world. So I try my best to make it fun as well.
And you've been doing a fantastic job, and you're obviously referencing the Watson's Daily, which is phenomenal. And I know you get up at the crack of dawn every day, and you've been committed to doing it for many years, providing tons of value, particularly in the legal space as well, to aspiring lawyers, etc. But was there a particular moment you realised there was a gap in the market for a platform like Watson's Daily?
Well, I mean, it started so when I was a headhunter, I remember I started off something called Watson's Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi stood for what I found interesting, which I thought was hilarious at the time.
That is brilliant, by the way. Just going to interject there and say that's brilliant.
Thank you. And so we started doing that, and basically a lot of people for the company that I worked for at the time, when they had management coming in, they would come into this meeting. So I started off doing a note, because everyone kept asking me stuff when I was at work. And I said, listen, why don't I just do something on a Friday? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you which businesses you should be calling to make some money. Right. So, that kind of got quite popular, and we had, managers used to come in, from different offices to this. So I thought it was pretty good. There was, some need there. And then when I was a headhunter, I was interviewing people, and I thought there were a lot of people that I met that I thought, you should know this, and in theory, like, your degree is this, all the theory, but you don't know how to apply it in a practical situation. So I thought, actually, maybe I could use my my experience, and help people to do that. And it basically, initially the idea of the newsletter was really to help people to prepare for interviews, really. And that's kind of how it started off. And then it got, momentum, there was a bit more momentum, and it went from being a sort of Word, / PDF document that I sent out to, my mum and a couple of friends, to something a bit bigger. And then I, in 2018, I thought, what, actually, I want to go all in on this. And so did a complete rebrand. I was told by the agency that, Watson's Wi-Fi sounded like a broadband magazine. So, reluctantly, I had to change it. And I thought, well, what shall I call it? And I thought, well, my name is Watson. It's my surname, by the way. So my name is Watson, and it comes out daily. So why not Watson's Daily? So there we go. That's basically what happened. And then after that, there were a few interesting moments that really suddenly catapulted it out of nowhere. And so that was it, basically. But yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah, and obviously you've had your own show as well, and that's been hugely successful, chart topping, no less. But I want to talk about commercial awareness because I know it's something you're really passionate about. And again,
Yeah.
want to educate our audience. We've got a whole spectrum of listeners, from those trying to break into profession, in the profession. And I think your definition of this and how you come at this will be really helpful. So it's a buzzword. Everyone's talking about commercial awareness, law, finance, consulting, you name it. But how do you define it, and why do so many professionals misunderstand it in terms of what it means?
There are loads of definitions out there, but I mean, I have a one sentence definition. It's the appreciation and understanding of how companies and industries interact with the wider environment and how they make money. That's it. I mean, there's a lot of, I know that there are various definitions floating out around there, but I just think that really you're trying to understand how companies think, how they interact with themselves, with the environment, with the industry, but also how does it apply to you and your business or your company or whatever. And I think that what is difficult, I think the main difficulty is there is a big gap between knowing what the news is and then thinking and then actually applying it to you and or your career and or company, because you never really get asked to do that until you get into the world of work properly. And I think that that's what people find difficult, because I think many people in a way start off by thinking that they almost treat it like revising for a pub quiz. They'll read things up, but the classic advice is, how do I improve my commercial awareness? The classic advice is read the FT. Now, the problem with that is that the FT is actually really hard to read if you don't know what you're doing. And pretty much everyone starts off, and I'm not including myself in this, by the way, and you start off thinking, right, I'm going to read the FT. And you start from page 1 and you desperately try to get to the end. And you just can't, because it's such a, I think it's the best, by the way, I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I just think it is the best newspaper in the world. I've read so many, well, in English anyway. I've read it for so long now, and it's just so well written, so densely packed. But the problem is that because it's densely packed and sort of assumes at least a bit of knowledge, I think that makes it intimidating for people. So when they start reading it, they think, what is this? And then they kind of give up. So I think there's a definite gap between what people think commercial awareness is and then how they apply the knowledge to their circumstances.
And let's bring it forward then, in terms of the world we're operating today, which is heavily shaped by AI, economic volatility, rapid tech change. Why is it perhaps more important than ever to understand commercial awareness, perhaps from years gone past?
I think the thing is, it's quite interesting how, I do a lot of presentations of things either at companies or universities and things like that. And it's very interesting how the subject of what I'm talking about changes. And so, for instance, I remember quite back, I do remember going to, I think it was Manchester University, for ages. It was pre-COVID and stuff. And I remember talking about GDPR. And I remember, standing in front of them saying, hey, do you know what GDPR is? And no one knew what it was. And I said, listen, you need to know this because this is really important. So I explained what it was, what the impact's going to be, all that kind of stuff. So at that point, GDPR was one big thing. I think that it would be fair to say that, especially since COVID, Russia invading Ukraine, President Trump, causing a bit of a stir, should we say, suddenly all these things that kind of seem to be, it's out there, it doesn't really apply to me. They really apply to you. Another example was, I used to talk, you sort of bang on about interest rates, right? I said, listen, I know that you're going to think interest rates, who cares? And the fact of the matter is they're actually quite important, so actually what I'm trying to do is to try to maybe guide people who, you might be sitting there watching the news, you listen, they always stick it in at the end. The Nikkei did this, the FTSE did that, the S&P, you're sitting there and it's all just going, and then, they might talk about the interest rate. And I would say most people just don't really think about it in terms of how does it apply to me. Some people might think about it in terms of what it does to their mortgage, but there are so many more, there's so many more impacts. And that's what I'm trying to do is, even taking something like that and then trying to explain it to people in a way that they can apply it to themselves and what the implications might be.
So let's keep it specific then. Obviously, we've got a large legal audience and sort of thinking about lawyers' advantage. Law firms are ranking commercial awareness. Obviously, I see it from a recruiting side as well as one of the top attributes that they're looking for in prospective candidates. So why do you think commercial awareness has become a critical skill for young lawyers?
Because at least one of the reasons is because I think it distinguishes a great candidate from a good candidate. Because I get the impression that, law firms will say, they'll kind of say, well, we expect you to know the law and understand the law. I mean, after all, that's what you've been studying for quite some time until this point. However, we need you to understand where this applies within the real world. And, I think another kind of brutal way of looking at it is law firms aren't charities. They have to pay money. And actually, some of them pay a lot of money. And so really, they want you to apply what is, your knowledge to what is going on in the real world so they can make some money. So, that's what that is. Sounds very mercenary, but that is what it is. And, and I think that, that's why it's not because they think, we want a well-rounded, I mean, there is a bit of that, but really, I think what it's all about is, can this person sitting in front of me use their knowledge to make us money?
Yeah.
And I know that sounds brutal.
No, but I think it's important, for-profit businesses, that's why they're in business. Otherwise, they'd be a charity. You mentioned at the top around your recruitment background, and obviously you spent years recruiting candidates from junior analysts to CEOs. What's been the biggest difference you've noticed between candidates who actually stand out and those who continue their skills? And I think you've also done or got a book or something around this as well, which you could tell us a bit more about.
Yeah. So I think really in terms of standing out, I think it's people who have the ability, I'm not going to say the cliche, but they have the ability to think flexibly. They are able to...
like you just did.
So I think, obviously we live in the real world. We don't live in a laboratory. Yeah. And so things happen that aren't foreseen. Just ask Boris Johnson, for instance. All those things happen, and you have to react because you can't just do it. Let's have a timeout. Things have to happen. So I think for me, I would say that for the roles that I recruited, I think yes, you want to tick all the boxes with regard to the skills that are needed, but in an ideal world, you're kind of looking for someone with a bit of an X factor, a bit of an appreciation, a bit of a flexibility of thought in an ideal world. But it's not. But I would also say, by the way, that not every job at every company requires that and a type A personality. Some jobs are. Some people just want to go, they want to do their job. They, ideally maybe a bit of mental stimulation and go home. And that's fine as well. But I'm just saying that I think that, for the people that I interviewed, that's what I did. I also, actually, I would just quickly add that, for the first time, when I was at, was at Robert Half, so it was, accountants and stuff like that. I covered the interim market as well as the permanent market. And I found that fascinating because I had never even thought of doing something on an interim basis. And because I thought, well, why would you? I mean, if you're really good, why wouldn't you stay in a company, get the pension and the holidays and all that? But it was fascinating speaking to them. And I think that they have a really different view of work and quite an interesting outlook, because it's almost like they get parachuted in to address a specific issue. They use all the experience that they gained to sort of sort it all out, and ideally then, bring someone in permanent to replace them, and then they ride off into the sunset. I mean, I think that's it didn't really occur to me, but actually meeting these people was amazing. So, yeah, there's also, as I say, different strokes for different folks, and I think that, it's not for everyone, that kind of thing, and it can be quite stressful. But it was very interesting to meet these types of people.
Yeah, and you've had a wealth of experience across different sectors, and you've probably, this leads nicely to where I want to go next, and seen a wealth of interviews. What are the most common mistakes students and indeed professionals make when discussing commercial awareness during their interviews?
Well, I think the worst one is not doing your research. I mean, there's nothing. I've interviewed people to join my teams, and there's nothing as an interviewer. There's nothing quite as galling to be sat opposite someone and they don't know much about the company or the role. You kind of think, let's just pack up now and just go home. That used to really get me. And especially these days, I mean, there's no excuse. There's so much stuff out there. And I think that, this materials, I think that, websites and things, they have improved. I mean, I would say, though, that actually, and I suppose this might be a bit controversial, but I actually think that the best way to research a company is not really their website. It's actually LinkedIn. And ideally, not the official stuff that you see on LinkedIn. So I'm sure you'll probably appreciate this, but given your background. But, when I was a headhunter, I was constantly trying to find people. I was trying to find people with certain set of skills. And it was very hard because quite often it's the people that don't want to be found are actually the gold that you're looking for. And so, I actually was going on there to look for people. And I think that, what I learned by doing that is there are ways. So I was also trying to map out companies as well. So I would look at a company, I would go on LinkedIn. By the way, I'm not sponsored by them either. They go on LinkedIn and I would map out, what their trading team or something like that. So then have a, sort of try and get my own market map. And then I would look at that. And then I would think, is this team, is it a revolving door? Do loads of people leave? Do they all leave and they go to the same place? Are there certain people that stay there in position? So what that would imply, for instance, is that you've got two senior people and they are very hard to dislodge. People stay there for 3 years or something, realize that this is going to be impossible to move on. So they go somewhere else. So, I mean, I'm just giving you an example. This is a way, I mean, I always describe this as to candidates as using LinkedIn backwards, because most people see LinkedIn as basically, write my CV, stick it on LinkedIn and just, and watch the good times roll. It's not quite like that. And if you the more you understand how recruiters actually use it, I think the more effective you'll be in terms of the way that actually you express yourself on there, and make sure that you've got the skills that they are actually looking for.
Couldn't agree more. I think it's bang on the money. One thing you talked a lot about is lots of information and AI and information overload. It's said many times we're drowning in information, but actually craving wisdom. So we have all this information available on every LLM, on every website, on every source. Has AI made commercial awareness easier to develop, or has it made it harder to distinguish meaningful insights from all the noise?
It's very difficult. I think so. On the one hand, anyone can put in, please can you find me the top stories of today or something. I mean, I don't know. I think that there is a delay, so I don't think you can actually do that. But I've tried. I've tried because the thing is that, I don't want to get up at 4 a.m. to write. I don't want it to. I would like to spend a little bit more time in bed. And I did try to sort of at one point to use AI. I went through. So just as a, for people who don't know, so I get up at 4 a.m. In order to write Watson's Daily, I read the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, Times, Telegraph, and Guardian. I pick out the stories that I think are going to be most impactful, and that comes from basically my time as a stockbroker, because I used to have to do that all the time, all day, all the time. And then, I'd come up with where I got the story from, a bit of a synopsis, and then I say, why is that important? And that is a lot of people call it the so what section, where I say, what the impact is on the, on the company, on the industry, on the region, and things like that. So I don't want to necessarily get up at 4 a.m. all the time. It ain't natural. It's certainly not natural for me. But I tried using AI, and initially, and I found this a lot with AI. Initially, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is amazing. This is going to change my life. I'm going to be able to get up at 5 a.m. or maybe even 6 a.m., and, really live it up. And the more I looked at it, the less good it was. And this is from someone that wanted it to work, right? I wanted it to work, but I just thought, actually, I spent more time correcting, editing, making it sound like me, that actually I'll just do it myself as always. And that's basically what happened. So, that's what's happened. I do, however, think it is very useful for things like, summaries and stuff like that, which can be very useful. I mean, I think, what's it called? Is it Ella? I forgot the name of it now, but there is one where you kind of put in an article, and it's absolutely wild. It makes a podcast out of it. It makes a video out of it. It makes a presentation out of it, all in a matter of minutes. Now, whether those things are actually any good, I would say they're 80% good. But the problem is, for some people, that's good enough. If you're revising for an exam or something, and maybe you like to hear things, a podcast version, then that's probably quite good. You might do it on the commute and stuff. You might find that useful. But if you're actually properly using it, you really want a 100% outcome. It's not going to do it for you. It's almost going to do it, but it's not quite.
Yeah. No, okay, fair comment. And, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as time goes on, of course. Law firms are investing heavily in training on the technical skills. How are law firms investing in helping their lawyers develop commercial understanding and business acumen? And perhaps what more could be done to assist them?
I'm working with, at the moment, at least one law firm. And basically, I train their lawyers. So all the way from their juniors right through to their senior partners on commercial awareness. And what they have done is they give me they say, look, here are the areas that we cover. Here are the clients within those areas. We want to see the news from that point of view. And, I really enjoy that, because it's kind of like when I was stockbroking, because, I would know, let's say I had 20 to 30 clients. Each of those clients would have different investment horizons. The the pension funds guy would say he'd buy and hold for 5 years. So he'd be interested in certain types and certain aspects of stories. You have the hedge fund guys who, they've got the concentration span of a goldfish, and they'd want to, they'd want results by the end of this week. They want to know, stories that all earn them money by the end of this week, in 2 weeks, in 1 month, all that sort of thing. But so you knew all the different things, and you just presented the stories that you had to give in the way that they're looking for them. Because it's no good giving them a story that is interesting, but they can't do anything with. So similarly with this, the way I coach now, is I'm trying to give them what they need in order to make the money. Now I can't do loads of this because there's only one of me, and it does take it does eat up considerable time, but it is fun, and that's how I'm doing it at the moment.
Today's episode is brought to you by Clio. If you're spending more time managing your practice than practicing law, it's time for a change. Clio is the intelligent legal work platform built for modern solicitors, combining context-aware AI with trusted legal research to help you work smarter, not harder. Switching is easier than you might think. Clio's dedicated migration teams handle your client and case data every step of the way, so you can focus on what matters most, your clients. Plus, award-winning support 24/5 via live chat, phone and email means help is always on hand when you need it. Visit clio.com/UK to find out why thousands of UK solicitors trust Clio. Now back to the show. At the moment, let's look forward then. Future. In the coming years, 5 years, I know it's so hard to tell, but what skills do you believe will separate the highest performing professionals from everyone else?
Being human, as in, so emotional intelligence, knowing how people work and react. I think that the so-called soft skills are going to become so much more important, and they're going to become hard skills, actually. To be able to read a room, to be able to understand how clients think, to be able to give people what they want in the way that they want it is easy to say, but difficult to do. And I think that the problem at the moment is I think that there are fewer opportunities for people to develop skills like that. And especially at the moment, because I would say, there's a lot of stuff about youth unemployment, and I think that they, it's not like, so I got a son who's just done his GCSEs, for instance, right? And people are talking about, summer jobs and things, but things like, hospitality, things that you might have done before. Like I worked at Sainsbury's. Again, I'm not specifying it. I worked at Sainsbury's, did the tills, did the trolley pushing, did the cheese at the deli counter, did all the stuff, and the ham. And I did all this stuff, and it helped me. It helped my confidence. It helped me talk to people. Okay, look, I've never been a shy retiring wallflower, but in a sort of grown up context, it was a very good experience. And I feel the young people are going to find it harder to get that kind of experience. So, I think that that being human is, and what it is to be human and to understand your fellow human beings is going to be a rarer and probably more premium quality, I think, going into the future.
I forget how many episodes we've done, well over 500, and probably a large chunk of them, I say this time and time again, we're no longer the B2B or B2C, it's H to H, human to human connection. That's what we are craving. That's what we're going to be needing moving forwards, and it's nice that you're echoing that here. Okay, business trends. Through Watson's Daily, you spend hours, you mentioned you're up at 4 a.m. every day, analysing business, economic development. What's the biggest trends professionals perhaps should be paying attention looking forward? Obviously, I appreciate AI is going to be part of that. Is there any subsections or anything else you would say trends-wise that people should really be thinking about in 2026?
The geopolitical situation, because I say it's going to sound boring, but it's anything but boring. If you take AI aside, because I'm sure it's been done to death, I do think that having a greater appreciation of the shifting sands of what is happening, with regard to the relationship between the US and the rest of the world, let's be honest. So the US, the UK, the US versus Europe, US versus the Middle East, and then the Middle East as well, what is happening there. The war, I think, has shifted perceptions of what countries had previously taken for granted. Now, all of this is very sort of high level stuff, but the way that filters down is, where does the investment go? Are you going to see more people moving to Dubai, for instance? And, are they going to, is it going to be expats? Is it not going to be expats? Are the expats on the way out? Is it going to be locals? That sort of thing. I think actually, although it does sound a bit too top down, I do think that it is very important, because there are shifts that are going on now that we have never seen before. And I think to have an appreciation of how that works and how it impacts you is extremely important and well worth keeping in mind if you are trying to sort of map out some kind of career path.
This might sound a little bit overwhelming to people. They're listening to this and they're thinking, wow, there's so much business news out there every day, so much going on. Where should they start? What practical habits would you recommend them to improve commercial awareness consistency?
I think start with what you know. So, okay. So first of all, think about how much time can you devote to this, right? That's the thing. So everyone will say, how long does it take to be good at commercial awareness? What do I do? I say, well, the thing is, you need to think practically. You need to think about how much time can you devote to this. Can you do 10 minutes a day? Can you do half an hour? Can you do an hour? Can you do 2 hours? I think the best thing to do is to think about what is the minimum amount that you can absolutely 100% guarantee to be able to do every single day, and stick with that. And if you can do any more any other days, then that's great. But what you don't want to do is to leave it and then revise it and think that you'll be okay, because you won't. Or you might luck out, but you probably won't. So it'd be like going into an exam that has 3 questions and there's 9 topics that they could be, and you've only learnt 3. There's a high percentage that you're not going to know what that it could work. You never know. Anyway, the point is, say first of all, you start off. What can you do? What amount of time can you do? And stick with that every day. And I mean every day. I mean 7 days a week. The second thing is think about what sources do you have access to. I'm very much a fan of newspapers because I think that they are consistent. They are very much, they have quality standards, whatever you might think. They have editors, they have teams that are looking at them. So think of the time, think of the sources, and then try to pick things up from there. Do what you can with the time that you're allowed. Another thing you can do is, I would say, if you're looking to gain sectoral knowledge, start with what you know. So, I mean, the most common one I've done, and I did a video on this ages ago, where I live in Guildford, right, and so I was walking up Guildford High Street, and I'm looking at the shops on either side, and so I'm saying, for instance, there's M&S. So M&S breaks down into food, non-food. In non-food, it's been, quite confusing. The offers and all that kind of been quite confusing, but they've sorted that out. They've got Ocado on the case, although maybe that's looking a bit tenuous these days. But they've also sorted out their non-foods, because it used to be, the clothing and stuff was very narrow in terms of what they had. But now you've got different brands in there. And it means that there's more reasons for more people from different demographics to actually go into M&S, because they might be going in for, as we all do, for, a Percy Pigs, of course. And then, come out with Percy Pigs and a bath towel and maybe a t-shirt or something like that. But, it's changed. So anyway, so I'll go down the street, and literally in my head, that is exactly what I'm thinking. I know that sounds weird. That's probably why most people don't walk with me up the high street. But I'm there. I'm like thinking, okay, who's that owned by? Who's that owned by? Is that a subsector of a company? Is it owned by private equity? Who bought it? You can do this all the time because, Wikipedia is always on you if it's on your phone. And you can look, if you don't know, you could quickly look at it. And then suddenly you start to get a framework, because this is the idea of what I'm trying to do generally, is to give people a knowledge framework. And then once you get this knowledge framework, you can just add extra bits onto it. But the final thing that is really, really important to really drill this, into your head is to discuss it. You don't know what you know and what you don't know until you try and talk about it. If you've ever been in the position, which I bet you've never been in this position, and I've only very occasionally been in this position, where you start talking about something thinking, yes, I know about this. And as you get further into it, you think, actually, do you know what? No, I don't. Now, the thing is, you don't want to be in that position when you're in an interview or if you're in an important client meeting. So you really need to talk about this with other people. And in an ideal world, you need to talk about it with people that actually know what they're talking about, because there's a certain amount of value in blasting out what you know, and it's good because it gets it out there. But really what you want is people that might challenge you or might give you an extra point of view, because that just adds to the richness of your knowledge. And actually, it's funny how when you're talking to, like, say, a small group of people about this kind of thing, that you remember what they say more than what you've read, because it's coming out of their mouth, and you've had a discussion about it. So although it's difficult, because let's face it, it may be a bit of a niche sort of topic of conversation. If you can find like-minded people, it will really help you. And, I do think that is very important for you, your confidence in the knowledge and the ability to deliver it in a concise and appropriate way.
Little masterclass there, folks. Thanks for sharing that, Peter. Very, very in-depth and helpful. Maybe a quick case study now to perhaps back this up. An example of someone who transformed their career opportunities through actually investing in improving their commercial awareness. What were the lessons maybe our listeners can take away from that particular story, if there's one top of mind?
I've had in the past, been very fortunate to have had a lot of Watson's Daily ambassadors, and I am looking for some more. And I've had a lot of stories from people that I've taken on, and there's one guy that springs to mind. I won't say exactly what he said and where he went, but he started off, and he started off as Watson's Daily ambassador, and I said, look, if you can help me, I will help you, right? So anyway, so it was really good. Did loads of, he did some writing for Watson's Daily, special reports, not the day, because I do the daily, but did some special reports. He did some podcasts when I was doing the podcasts every day. And he was part of the social media team as well. So we put out a lot of stuff that, back then. And he said, he went from getting nothing, not even sort of vac schemes or anything like that, to getting a lot of offers. And then, he went and worked for a very big company for quite a lot of money, and he's done very well, and he loved it, and he's really doing well for himself now. And he said, doing the podcast was he said it was just like doing the partner interview. So what I've always tried to do, and I haven't done this for a while, I must admit, but talking to Watson's Daily ambassadors on a podcast is what I've tried to do, is to get them articles, to ask them to talk about one topic from that day's Watson's Daily. I talk about another topic. And what happens is, what I'm trying to do is over prepare them for the podcast. Because our podcasts were probably about 15 minutes long. And I tried to over prepare them, because I said, my objective with this podcast is to make you sound as good as possible. I want people to listen to this podcast and think, we've got to hire that person. So that's basically what happened. And it was really good. And I mean, look, they're not my kids, right? They're not my kids. But I do feel a certain sense of, it's so nice to see these people. And I know what they the issues that they had when they started, and to get to know them, and they get involved, and it was just amazing, really. And I'm so massively grateful for the help that I've had. They've all contributed in some way. I mean, I see things still on Watson's Daily, and I think, oh yeah, that was done by this person. This was the idea that person did. Honestly, it's absolutely brilliant. And I think that I've also been very occasionally, I've been stopped on the streets. I mean, the most bizarre one was quite recently. I was watching an England match at Twickenham or the Aviva Stadium, and I think there was 81,000 or 71 or 81,000 people on that day, and this guy came up to me and he said, "Are you Watson's Daily?" And I went, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, thanks for the podcast. You do this at dailies and blah." It was so nice. I thought, I mean, what are the chances? What are the chances of that? So that was quite cool. But I think that until I'm asked to do like Strictly, I don't think I will call it fame. But it was quite funny, and it's just nice, sometimes people will come up to me and they'll say, "I've got my dream job. I couldn't have got it without you." That is what makes getting up at 4 a.m. worth it. When on the days when it's not hot, when it's cold outside, it's dark outside. I know people are going to think this is so cheesy, but honestly, it's that is what makes it worth it. So, so there we go.
You're making an impact, aren't you? And, it's a great sort of legacy that you're building. And yeah, a bit of industry fame. Why not? Here's to that. Okay. Senior leaders, what can they do to create more commercial awareness within their organizations? How can they encourage curiosity, learning, enthusiasm across their teams?
That's a really good question. I've never been asked that before. I would suggest that if they possibly can, and this is difficult to do because the billable hour is still there, so they're very sort of conscious of time. But I just think that if they take the time to have a chat with if it's possible, with junior staff, or just within their teams, of how they do it, how they see a story, how they break it down, and how they use that to make money. I think, and tell them, by the way, that one of the reasons why I got this particular work is because I said this to this client and they reacted and they did this, is to give. So I think if they can try to share the way that they think and the way they do it more with their staff, that would be great. But I know that it's not always possible. But I think if there's a way to sort of create a space where they can just sit and talk about this stuff, that I think that would be really valuable, because you could have everyone in a room, like your juniors and more senior people talking about the same kind of thing, and they can then try to help them in the way that they think about these issues, about the themes. And I think that would sort of accelerate their education and make them more likely to make more money for the company sooner. And it will help them get over that kind of how does this even apply? I think that would be great if they could do that.
I couldn't agree more. That knowledge sharing is super powerful. Let's stick with education then, to just mention it. Do you think universities, law schools, professional training programs are doing enough to prepare students for commercial realities of modern business?
I'd say no. The reason is they've got so much other stuff to do. The thing is, it's a bit, well, in a way, I mean, it's not like financial education. I mean, I'm a big believer of this whole movement. Like, I think, Carla Hoppe and, lots of other people doing stuff with regard to helping educate people and campaigning to educate people from an early stage in terms of financial, like, their sort of domestic balance sheet has been seen to be a nice to have, but is now coming into the mainstream. I suspect that, something like commercial awareness is probably going to stay within the nice to have. But I think that there's a lot of scope to use it. I mean, when I first started out, there was a school. So I met this guy in a pub and I told him what I did. And he said, God, that'd be really interesting. He said, I teach sixth form, right, in this school in Lancaster, actually. And anyway, so I basically got in front of someone, the guy who's head of economics and business studies at the school. And he said, wow, this is great. Really like the stuff. And what ended up happening was they used to use Watson's Daily, or what it was known back then, Watson's Wi-Fi. And they used to use it as the economics in the real world class. So they used to actually base a class on it. And the idea was that they used that as a discussion topic. They used that as a springboard, as it were, and then talk about it. Now, I must say, I haven't done loads of stuff with schools since then, but I do think it is something that they certainly could do, and it would be nice if they could. And I think that maybe in economics or business studies classes, it is something that they could do. I mean, I've sort of said to my son, who's hopefully going to sixth form, I've said, oh yeah, what do you think about Dad going into your school? He said, no, don't do it, don't do it until I've left. So I'm not allowed to go to his school. But like you say, I do think it's something that is a really good thing for teachers to be able to do, because they can say, look, this is the theory, but look at this is what's happening in the real world. Because I remember, I would have thought that things like interest rates and stuff are just something that your average student is not that interested in. But when they see what happens and why it's going up and down, what the reasons are behind the decisions, suddenly it comes alive, and it means that you remember it. So it's a good thing.
And it's once it's relatable to them and they can see the impact or what happens, I think it amplifies things. Okay, let's talk about future-proofing careers for a couple of wrap-up questions. If you're advising a graduate, a trainee solicitor, young professional entering the legal industry, what would be your top 3 pieces of career advice? Your top 3.
First of all, understand yourself and your motivations. Okay. If you don't do that, you are setting yourself up to fail. Because if you don't understand yourself and your motivations, you are not going to be able to convince anyone else. Mm-hmm. I mean, you might be able to, but the problem is that you quite possibly will end up, you'll be able to fake it for a bit, but then it will catch up with you and you will end up in a difficult situation. So I think number 1 is understand yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, what your motivations are. I mean, that whole thing, the classic questions of why law and then why this firm is so, it's so kind of, it's not overdone, but there are obvious things, and you really need to get to the bottom of that. Actually, you were saying earlier about how, stories about people that I've known who improved their commercial awareness and stuff. There was one person, and she said that she thought when she went in, she thought she had a really good why this firm, why law and were this firm. But then she didn't quite get there. She got very close to it, but didn't quite get there. Actually, this has happened to a few people I know, and they've gone out, they've become paralegal, they've done paralegaling, maybe done something else. Then they come back, and then they say the difference. So I've asked them, what is the difference between you not getting an offer and you getting an offer? And they all said it was because of the motivation, because they could then, having been away from it and sort of really thinking about it and then coming back, they understood themselves better in the workplace of what they could offer and why they wanted to be there. So that is what happened. So number 1, I know that sounds a bit corny, but really I think that's the best thing. Secondly, I think, be open, be open. So have a plan, have a kind of a plan, because it's always better, I think it's always better to have a plan than not. Because if you have a plan, you can really think about, you can see opportunities. If you don't have a plan and you just think, I'll just leave it to fate, let's see what happens, you might get the most amazing opportunity, but because it doesn't look like it's not an obvious opportunity, there's a chance you might not take it. And if that is the case, it's an opportunity lost. You don't get loads of opportunities in this life. And so the ones that you do get that align with what you want, they are worth grabbing with both hands. And I think that you need to have a bit of a plan, but be prepared to change, because things, life changes, priorities change, motivations change all the way through, and you have to adapt. And I think that's the second bit of advice I would say. So have a bit of a plan. Third one, go all in. Go all in. Especially if you're at the beginning of your career. I know this is probably not going to be massively popular to say, but I think that going in and saying, I want work-life balance from the off, I think you're setting yourself up to be disappointed, because, there's a huge gap between academia and the real world in terms of the company, your career. There's a huge gap, and it takes a lot to bridge that gap. And there are times you can't always get that within the 9 to 5 or whatever it is. You can't always get it within that. And I think that you have to prioritize your career for a bit at least and review. This is the thing. So I think that sometimes people say, well, I'll just do whatever, it's fine. And they think like that for ages, and they stay in and they keep doing it because that's what they do. And it's all encompassing. I mean, I think that law seems to be a very all consuming kind of job, and it's very difficult to switch off. And I think you do that, and then you get to a point and you think, hold on a minute, what have I done? I'm 8 years down the line. I didn't think I was going to be here. But that's what happens if you just let fate happen. But so what I would say is, in order for that to stop happening, is maybe to sort of review yourself, maybe once every year is a bit too often, but maybe once every 2 years or something, maybe even before, let's say you're going to start having a family or something, maybe before a big event like that. I think that it's another thing to sort of think about your priorities and to think holistically. Don't just think about the job, because the job is just one aspect of your life. You have to think of where the job fits in with your life, with your family, your aspirations, where you want to be. Do you want to have, be able to go off and an amazing holiday? Do you want to go off on skiing holidays and a few other holidays a year, and do whatever you want socially, and just never worry about money? In which case, you're probably going to have to do pretty long hours. Or are you going to be, do you want to see your family more? In which case, for instance, don't apply to these kinds of firms. Go to those kinds of firms, because at some point you are going to come a cropper. And so one other thought I would add to all this is that I really believe that you don't know what it's like to do a full-time job until you're in it. It's so hard to understand, because it's unlike anything. I mean, just think about, there was that guy a few years ago who I think he used to be. I mean, I think he was in the Delta Force or something like that, right? So he was an elite US military person, and he committed suicide. He was at an investment bank, committed suicide. You're thinking, hold on a minute, how can someone do that, being under the pressure that he was under doing, in his previous job, to now? And you think, there's different types of pressure. And I think that, obviously, to do something as dramatic as that, the job is not the only thing. There's a lot of, things have gone into that, and situations and stuff. But my point is that you just don't know. You just have to think of your priorities, and you have to think of how things are changing, and it's very difficult to understand what the pressures of the job are until you've done it. So you just beware of yourself and don't try and do too much right from the off, because it's exhausting.
It's a marathon, not a sprint, isn't it? A career. And, I think it's been really, really, really good conversation. So a couple of final questions before I let you go, Peter. If you had to complete this sentence, how would you finish it? The professionals who thrive in the next decade will not necessarily be the smartest. They will be the ones who...
They will be the ones who see the trends just before everyone else does.
Like it. Okay. If our listeners want to follow you, learn more about you, Watson's Daily, or apply to be a brand ambassador, where can they go to find out more?
Yeah, so thank you very much. Watson's Daily, follow the socials and things. I've if you want to know about the careers side of things, I've written a book called a Career That Fits. It is on Watson's. It is part of the Watson's Daily subscription, which starts at $9.99 a month. But you can look at that, and you can literally. I sat down and I wrote everything I know about recruitment, about being a candidate, and across all sorts of different industries and seniorities and stuff like that, and in order to try and help people. Because all the news that we're seeing at the moment is quite sad. It makes me feel sad, about the youth unemployment and stuff. So, yeah, there we go.
And there we have it, folks. Peter's helped thousands of professionals understand the business world, effectively actually making these complex commercial, economic developments easier for you to understand and actually go out and apply to help you get better jobs, to promote well within your organizations, and just do so much. So, Peter, it's been an absolute blast finally having you on the Legally Speaking podcast sponsored by Clio. Wishing you lots of continued success with Watson's Daily and indeed future pursuits. But from all of us on the show, over and out.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com. There's a link to join our community there. Over and out.